When humanity found the forgotten Captain Sarah Chun had seen plenty of derelict ships in her 15 years, running salvage operations through the Kepler Nebula, but nothing quite like this. The massive vessel drifted silently through the cosmic dust clouds, its hull scarred and pitted from years of neglect. What made it unusual wasn't its size or the strange geometric patterns etched into its metal skin. It was the fact that it was still powered up. "Marcus, you seeing these energy readings?" Sarah called to her chief engineer, who was hunched over, his console with the intensity of a man trying to solve the universe's greatest puzzle. Marcus Torres looked up from his instruments, his weathered face creased with confusion. "Cap, this thing's got power, life support, even artificial gravity. But the thermal signatures are all wrong. It's like they're running everything on minimum settings." Dr. Elena Vasquez, their xenobiologist, floated over from her research station, with the excited energy that always meant she'd found something fascinating. "The hull composition doesn't match any known species in our databases. The metal has organic compounds woven into it. I've never seen anything like it." Sarah studied the massive ship through the view screen of their salvage vessel, the Wanderer's Hope. Something about the situation felt off. In her experience, ships this size didn't just get abandoned with the lights still on. Either they were ghost ships with some terrible fate awaiting inside, or there was something very wrong with the picture they were seeing. "Let's take her slow," Sarah decided. "Full bioscan first. If there are survivors over there, I want to know before we go knocking on their door." The bioscan results that came back 20 minutes later made Elena gasp and Marcus curse under his breath. The ship wasn't just occupied. It was packed with life signs. Thousands of them clustered throughout what appeared to be residential sections of the massive vessel. "These readings can't be right," Elena muttered, running the scan 3 more times. "It shows over 8,000 individual life forms, but their vital signs are ... weak. Extremely weak." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Weak how?" "Like they're dying," Elena said quietly. "All of them." The ethical choice was clear, even if the practical one wasn't. Sarah had grown up in the outer colonies where neighbors looked out for each other because nobody else would. She joined the salvage business not for the money, but because she loved the idea of giving broken things a second chance. This felt like the biggest second chance she'd ever encountered. "Prep the shuttle," she ordered. "Full diplomatic approach. Universal translators, medical supplies, and Elena, bring your full xenobiology kit. If we're walking into a plague ship, I want to know what we're dealing with." The docking bay they entered was enormous, easily large enough to hold a dozen ships. The size of the Wanderer's Hope, but it was also eerily empty and dimly lit. The air was breathable but stale, carrying scents that reminded Elena of old libraries and sick rooms. They hadn't walked 50 meters into the ship before they encountered their first alien dot. It stood about 4 feet tall, with an insectoid body covered in what looked like natural armor plating. 4 arms extended from its torso, and its head was dominated by large, multifaceted eyes that seemed to hold an ancient sadness. When it saw them, it didn't run or attack. Instead, it simply sank to the ground in what could only be described as defeat. "Please," it said in a voice that their universal translators rendered as barely above a whisper. "We have nothing left to take. The hegemony took everything of value long ago." Sarah knelt down to bring herself to the creature's eye level. A gesture that seemed to surprise it. "We're not here to take anything. We're humans. We saw your ship and thought you might need help." The alien's eyes seemed to focus on Sarah with newfound intensity. "Humans? I do not know this word. Are you another client species of the hegemony?" "The hegemony?" Marcus asked, stepping forward. "Never heard of them. We're from Earth, in the Sol system. Independent." Something changed in the alien's posture. Hope Perhaps, or maybe just confusion. You are not bound to serve the great powers? But then, why are you here? Elena had been quietly scanning the alien with her handheld medical device. The readings she was getting made her heart ache. Sarah, this being is severely malnourished, dehydrated. I'm reading signs of multiple vitamin deficiencies and what looks like a wasting disease. What's your name? Sarah asked gently. I am called Zephyra. I am Jekti. We are... She paused, as if searching for the right words. We were cargo. The word hit the humans like a physical blow. Sarah had to take a deep breath before she could speak again. Cargo? You mean slaves? Not slaves, Zephyra said, though without much conviction. A hegemony does not believe in slavery. We were indentured workers. Our species owed a debt that could never be repaid, so we served to work toward that goal. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. And they just left you here? The hegemony decided we were ... defective. Too slow. Too weak. Not worth the resources to maintain. They marked our ship as salvage and abandoned us in this nebula. That was many cycles ago. Zephyr looked around the empty docking bay. We expected to die quietly. Sarah stood up, her mind racing. 8,000 beings, abandoned to die simply because they couldn't work fast enough to satisfy their masters. The moral equation was simple, even if the practical complications were enormous. Zephyra, I need you to take us to your leader. We need to talk about getting you and your people out of here. For the first time since they'd met her, Zephyra's eyes showed something other than despair. You would help us? But we are not your species. We have nothing to offer you. Where we come from, Sarah said firmly, that's exactly when people need help the most. The journey through the Jekti ship was a sobering experience. The corridors were filled with beings who looked like they were just barely hanging on to life. Children huddled close to their parents. Elders sat quietly in corners with the patience of those who had accepted their fate. The ship itself showed signs of careful maintenance, despite the obvious resource shortage. These people had been trying to survive. Elder Crixful was waiting for them in what served as the ship's center of government, a large chamber where several dozen Jekti had gathered. Unlike Zephyra, Crixful was larger and bore visible scars across his carapace that spoke of a harder life. When Sarah's group entered, he studied them with the careful attention of someone who had learned not to trust easily. Young Zephyra says you are humans and that you wish to help us, he said without preamble. Forgive me if I am skeptical. In my long life, I have learned that when powerful beings offer help to the weak, there is always a price. There's no price, Sarah said. We're offering aid because you need it. That's it. And when the hegemony returns to check on their salvage, what then? Marcus stepped forward. Let us worry about the hegemony. Right now, your people are dying. Our ship has medical supplies and food synthesizers. Let us start there. For the next several hours, the crew of the Wanderer's Hope worked alongside the Jekti to establish emergency medical treatment centers throughout the ship. Elena discovered that despite their insectoid appearance, Jekti biology was surprisingly compatible with human medical knowledge. Many of their ailments were simply the result of prolonged malnutrition and could be treated with proper food and vitamins. As they worked, Sarah learned more about the Jekti's situation. They had been indentured to the hegemony for over 3 generations, working in mining operations and manufacturing facilities throughout the galaxy. Their natural ability to work in low-gravity environments and their skill with biotechnology had made them valuable, until automation and other species proved more efficient. The hegemony keeps detailed records of all client species, Elder Crixval explained as Elena treated a group of Jekti children. When they marked us as salvage, they also marked us as non-entities in their database. As far as the galaxy is concerned, we no longer exist. That might actually work in our favor, Marcus said thoughtfully. If you're officially salvage, then. Salvage rights apply. And since we found you first, Sarah caught on to his thinking immediately. You belong to us now, legally speaking, which means we can decide what happens to you. And we decide you're free, Elena added, looking up from her medical scanner. The emotional impact of those words on the Jekti was immediate and overwhelming. Several of the elders began making chittering sounds that the universal translator interpreted as something between sobbing and laughter. Young Zifara, who had stayed close to the humans throughout their work, reached out tentatively to touch Sarah's hand. Free, she repeated, as if testing the word. We can choose where to go? What to do? That's what free means, Sarah confirmed. But their celebration was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Wanderer's Hope. Sarah's remaining crew member, Navigator Tom Kim, was practically shouting through the communicator. Captain, we've got company incoming. 3 ships heading straight for us at high speed. Configuration matches hegemony patrol vessels from our database. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Time to intercept? 18 hours, maybe less. She looked around at the thousands of Jekti they'd been working to save, then at her own small crew. The Wanderer's Hope was a salvage vessel, not a warship. In a straight fight against hegemony patrol ships, they wouldn't last 5 minutes. Elder Crixfell, she said urgently, we need to get your people off this ship now. How many can we fit on the Wanderer's Hope? The elder's eyes dimmed. Perhaps 50, if we crowd together. But Captain Shun, there are 8,000 of us. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. They could try to restore power to the Jekti ship's engines, but that would take days they didn't have. They could send a message to Earth requesting assistance, but help wouldn't arrive for weeks. The mathematics of the situation were brutal and unforgiving. Marcus was studying the Jekti ship's schematics on his portable scanner. Sarah, this ship is actually in better condition than it looks. The power systems are intact, just running on minimum settings to conserve energy. If we can get the engines online. How long? Sarah asked. 6 hours, maybe 8, but that's still cutting it close. Elena looked up from where she was treating another group of children. There might be another option. The Jekti have been maintaining this ship for years with limited resources. They know every system, every workaround. If we work together. Elder Crixvola's expression shifted to something Sarah was beginning to recognize as hope mixed with determination. We have been preparing for this day for many cycles. Not hoping for rescue, but preparing to try one last time to save ourselves. If humans will help us, we can be ready to flee when the hegemony arrives. Then let's get to work, Sarah said. Tom, patch me through to Earth Fleet Command. Tell them we've got a situation out here and request immediate assistance. Emergency protocols. As her crew in the Jekti began working frantically to restore the massive ship's systems, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to make history. Humanity had encountered dozens of alien species since achieving faster-than-light travel, but this was different. This wasn't first contact with a powerful civilization or a trade negotiation with equals. This was humanity choosing to stand between predators and prey. 18 hours later, as the hegemony ships dropped out of hyperspace and took threatening positions around both vessels, Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the Jekti ship with her small crew and 8,000 newly freed beings behind her. The Wanderer's Hope was docked and ready to fight alongside their new allies. The communication that came from the lead hegemony vessel was exactly what she'd expected. Attention, human vessel. You are interfering with hegemony salvage operations. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Sarah looked at Elder Crixvol, who nodded gravely. She looked at young Zephyra, who was watching her with absolute trust. She looked at her own crew, who were ready to follow her into whatever came next. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth vessel Wanderer's Hope," she said into the communicator. "The beings on this ship are under our protection. You'll have to go through us." The die was cast. In the next few hours, humanity would either prove itself worthy of the trust these abandoned beings had placed in them, or they would die together as the species that didn't know when to walk away from a fight they couldn't win. Asterisk when Earth's children make their choice. Admiral Rebecca Cross had been enjoying a quiet morning coffee in her Earth Fleet Command office when the emergency transmission arrived from the Kepler Nebula. By the time she'd finished reading Captain Chun's report, her coffee was cold and her morning was ruined. "Get me a direct line to the Wanderer's Hope," she ordered her communications officer, "and prep the Wellington, Phoenix, and Defiant for immediate deployment. Combat readiness." 20 minutes later, she was speaking directly with Sarah Chun. Across 40 light years of space, watching the young salvage captain's face on her view screen, while hegemony ships held threatening positions around two vessels that looked pitifully small by comparison. "Captain Chun, you've put us in quite a situation," Admiral Cross said without preamble. "Do you have any idea what the diplomatic ramifications of this could be?" "With respect, Admiral, I don't care about diplomatic ramifications right now," Sarah replied. "There are 8,000 innocent beings here who are abandoned to die. The math on this is pretty simple from where I'm sitting." Admiral Cross had to admire the younger woman's backbone, even if she was questioning her judgment. "The hegemony controls 17 star systems and has defensive agreements with 40 more. Earth has been carefully neutral in galactic politics since we achieved FTL, starting a war over salvage." "Rights isn't exactly, Admiral," Sarah interrupted. "They're not salvage. They're people, and they asked us for help." In the background of the transmission, Admiral Cross could see Jekti working alongside Chun's small crew, preparing for what looked like a desperate last stand. She'd read the reports about the hegemony's client species system, but seeing the reality of it was different. These weren't the powerful alien civilizations that Earth usually encountered in diplomatic settings. These were refugees. "What's your tactical situation, Captain?" 3 hegemony patrol vessels, heavily armed. The Jekti ship has some defensive capabilities, but nothing that would make a difference in a real fight. The Wanderer's Hope has standard salvage equipment, which is to say we have some mining charges and a really good prayer. Admiral Cross made a decision that would later be studied in military academies for decades. "Hold your position, Captain. Help is on the way." The hegemony fleet commander, a being called Ambassador Kethmer, had been dealing with minor species for over 2 centuries. In his experience, most young civilizations could be intimidated into compliance with a show of force and some stern language. When he opened communications with the human vessels, he expected this to be resolved quickly. "I am Ambassador Kethmer of the Hegemony First Fleet," he announced in the formal tone reserved for dealing with inferiors. "Your interference with official hegemony operations constitutes an act of aggression. Withdraw immediately and turn over the salvage vessel, or face immediate consequences." The response came not from the small salvage ship, but from the human captain aboard the Jekti vessel. "Ambassador, this is Captain Sarah Chun. I'm going to explain this once, clearly. The beings on this ship are not salvage. They are not property. They are free individuals under the protection of Earth. Any attempt to harm them will be considered an act of war." Ambassador Kethmer felt a flicker of annoyance. "Captain Chun, your species is new to galactic affairs. Perhaps you do not understand how these matters work. The Jekti are indentured to the hegemony. Their debt cannot be transferred to another species." "Actually," said a new voice from the Jekti ship, "we've done some research on that." The speaker was Dr. Elena Vasquez, and she was reading from a datapad with the enthusiasm of someone who had just discovered a loophole in the universe's most complex legal code. According to Galactic Commercial Code Section 847.3, any property abandoned in deep space for more than 2 standard cycles automatically reverts to salvage status, Elena said. Section 1205.7 states that salvage claims belong to the first party to render aid. Section 1847.2 declares that sapient beings cannot be held as property by any galactic civilization that has signed the Sentient Rights Accords. There was a long silence on the communication channel. The hegemony signed those accords 400 years ago, Elena continued cheerfully. I checked. Ambassador Kethmer was rapidly realizing that this conversation was not going according to plan. The humans are attempting to use technicalities to interfere with established hegemony policy. This will not be tolerated. Then you're going to have a problem, said yet another new voice. This time it was Admiral Cross, speaking from the bridge of the Earth Fleet vessel, Wellington, as it dropped out of hyperspace, along with 2 other heavily armed human ships. This is Admiral Rebecca Cross of Earth Fleet Command, she announced. Captain Chun is operating under my direct authority. The Jekti have requested asylum under Earth protection, and that request has been granted. Ambassador Kethmer quickly recalculated the tactical situation. 3 hegemony patrol vessels against 3 Earth warships that looked significantly more advanced than anything in the human technology assessments he'd read. More concerning was the fact that humanity had just demonstrated it could respond to threats in distant parts of the galaxy within hours. Admiral Cross, the hegemony has no quarrel with Earth. However, we cannot allow the precedent of client species being declared free without compensation. Ambassador, Admiral Cross replied coldly, the precedent you should be worried about is what happens when civilizations abandon thousands of beings to die in deep space. That's not a precedent Earth is willing to tolerate. On the Jekti ship, Elder Krixval was watching the exchange with amazement. In his long life, he had never seen any species stand up to the hegemony like this. But it was young Zephyra who asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Captain Chun, why are your people doing this for us? You could leave and be safe. We are nothing to you. Sarah turned from the tactical display to look at the young Jekti. Where I come from, we have an old saying. We judge a person not by how they treat their equals, but by how they treat those who cannot defend themselves. I think that applies to entire species, too. Marcus, who had been quietly working on the ship's defensive systems, looked up from his console. Besides, you're not nothing to us anymore. You're part of the family now. The concept seemed to confuse several of the Jekti. Family was a biological concept to them, not a chosen one. But Elder Krixval understood immediately. You adopt strays, he said with something that might have been a smile. This is why you came to help us. Everyone deserves someone who won't. Abandon them, Elena added simply. The standoff continued for 6 more hours, with neither side willing to back down. The hegemony ships maintained their threatening positions, while the Earth Fleet vessels held a protective formation around the Jekti ship. It was Ambassador Kethmer who finally broke the deadlock, though not in the way anyone expected. Admiral Cross, the hegemony is prepared to negotiate. However, we require compensation for the loss of our property. How much compensation? Admiral Cross asked. The Jekti owe a debt of approximately 2 million hegemony credits. We will accept equivalent value in rare metals or technology. There was a pause while Admiral Cross consulted with someone off-screen. When she returned, her expression was grimly satisfied. Ambassador Kethmer, the Jekti ship we're protecting contains approximately 3 million credits worth of biotechnology. Patents. The Jekti have agreed to sell these patents to Earth in exchange for debt forgiveness and full citizenship. We'll be happy to transfer 2 million credits worth of this technology to the hegemony as settlement for their claimed debt. The elegant solution left Ambassador Kethmer with no reasonable objection. The hegemony got their compensation, the Jekti got their freedom, and Earth got both new citizens and valuable technology. More importantly, it established a precedent that would echo across the galaxy as the hegemony ships withdrew and the immediate crisis passed. Sarah found herself surrounded by Jekti who were still trying to process what had just happened. They were free, truly free, for the first time in generations. "What happens now?" Elder Crixwell asked. "Now you decide," Admiral Cross said, her image appearing on the main view screen. "Earth has several colony worlds that could accommodate your population. We also have research facilities where your biotechnology expertise would be invaluable. The choice is yours." But it was young Zephyra who asked the question that would define humanity's role in the galaxy for centuries to come. "Captain Shun, are there others like us out there? Others who have been abandoned?" Sarah exchanged glances with her crew, then looked back at the young Jekti. "Probably. The galaxy's a big place, and powerful civilizations don't always treat the weak very well. Then we should help them too," Zephyra said with the simple logic of youth. "If we are family now, then they should be family too." And that was how Earth's stray sanctuary policy was born, not in a government meeting room or a military planning session, but in the words of a young alien who had just learned what it meant to be part of a family that never abandons its own. Within a decade, 17 different species that had been declared non-viable by various galactic powers had found their way to Earth protection. The humans became known throughout the galaxy not as conquerors or traitors, but as the species that collected strays. They were the civilization you called when you had nowhere else to go. The hegemony, for their part, quietly reformed their client species policies. Other galactic powers began reviewing their own treatment of subject populations. It turned out that when someone was willing to fight for the abandoned, everyone had to reconsider what abandonment really meant. Sarah Chon continued running salvage operations for another 20 years. But her ship was never just a salvage vessel again. The Wanderer's Hope became the unofficial rescue ship for lost civilizations, always ready to respond when someone sent out a distress call. And in the archives of Earthfleet Command, Admiral Rebecca Cross kept a recording of that first transmission. From the Kepler Nebula, the one where a young salvage captain had declared that 8,000 dying aliens were under human protection. It was filed under "The Day Humanity Chose Its Path." Because sometimes the most important decisions aren't made by governments or armies or diplomats. Sometimes they're made by ordinary people who see someone in need and simply say, "We can't leave them behind." The galaxy became a little bit smaller that day, and a lot more like a family. Asterisk.